Asterisk Avalokita, Sanskrit, equals, looking down, but also, seen, Isvara equals, Lord. Hence, both, the Lord looking down, in pity, and, the Lord seen, within, A and I combine into E in Sanskrit. Hence Avalokitesvara. C. W. Y. Evans Wentz, Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines, London, Oxford University Press, 1935, page 233, note 2. Asterisk This is the wall of paradise, see above, here and also here. We are now inside. Shi Wang Mu is the feminine aspect of the Lord who walks in the garden, who created man in his own image, male and female, Book of Genesis, 127. Asterisk, and the Word was made flesh, verse of the Angelus, celebrating the conception of Jesus in Mary's womb. Asterisk Babylonian prototype of the biblical Noah. Asterisk, naturally, writes Dr. Steckel, to be dead, here means, to be alive. She begins to live and the officer, lives, with her. They die together. This throws a glaring light on the popular fantasy of the double suicide. It should be noted also that this dream includes the well-nigh universal mythological image of the sword bridge, the razor's edge, which appears in the romance of Lancelot's rescue of Queen Guinevere from the castle of King Death. Endnotes. 1. Apuleius, The Golden Ass, Modern Library Edition, pp. 131-41. 2. Knud Lehm, Beskrivelse over Finnmarkens Lapper, Copenhagen, 1767, pp. 475-78. An English translation will be found in John Pinkerton, A General Collection of the Best and Most Interesting Voyages and Travels in All Parts of the World, London, 1808, Volume I, pp. 477-78. 3. E. J. Jessen, Of Handling om den norske Finners og Lappers Hedenske Religion, page 31. This work is included in Lehm's volume, Op. Cit, as an appendix with independent pagination. 4. Uno Harva, Die Religiösen Vorstellungen der Altischen Völker, Folklore Fellows Communications, No. 125, Helsinki, 1938, pp. 558-59. Following G. N. Patanen, Oserki Severo Zapadno Mongolia, St. Petersburg, 1881, Volume IV, pp. 64-65. 5. Geza Roheim, The Origin and Function of Culture, Nervous and Mental Disease Monographs, No. 69, pp. 38-39. 6. Ibid, page 38. 7. Ibid, page 51. 8. Underhill, Op. Cit, Part 2, Chapter 3, compare above. 9. Wilhelm Steckel, Fortschritt und Technik der Traumdeutung, page 124. 10. Swedenborg's Dramar, 1774, Gemte Endre Hans Anteckninger efter Original Handskrifter Meddelade AFGE. Clemming, Stockholm, 1859. Quoted in Ignaz Jasauer, Das Buch der Trauma, Berlin. Ernst Rowohlt Verlag, 1928, page 97. 11. Jasauer, Op. Cit, page 166. 12. Plutarch, Themistocles, 26, Jasauer, Op. Cit, page 18. 13. Steckel, Fortschritt und Technik der Traumdeutung, page 150. 14. Ibid, page 153. 15. Ibid, page 45. 16. Ibid, page 208. 17. Ibid, page 216. 18. Ibid, page 224. 19. Ibid, page 159. 20. Ibid, page 21. 21. Steckel, Die Sprache des Traumas, page 200. See also Heinrich Zimmer, The King and the Corpse, ed. J. Campbell, New York, Bollingen Series, 1948, pp. 171-72. Also D. L. Kumaraswamy, The Perilous Bridge of Welfare, Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies 8. 22. Steckel, Die Sprache des Traumas, page 287. 23. Ibid, page 286. 24. Koren, 2-214. 25. S. N. Kramer, Sumerian Mythology, American Philosophical Society Memoirs, Volume 21. Philadelphia, 1944, pp. 86-93. The mythology of Sumer is of especial importance to us of the West, for it was the source of the Babylonian, Assyrian, Phoenician, and biblical traditions, the last giving rise to Mohammedanism and Christianity, as well as an important influence in the religions of the pagan Celts, Greeks, Romans, Slavs, and Germans. 26. Jeremiah Curtin, Myths and Folklore of Ireland, Boston, Little, Brown and Company, 1890, pp. 101-6. 27. See above. 28. Ovid, Metamorphoses, 3, 138-252. 29. C. J. C. Flugel, The Psychoanalytic Study of the Family, The International Psychoanalytical Library, No. 3, 4th edition. London, The Hogarth Press, 1931, chapters 12 and 13. There exists, Professor Flugel observes, a very general association on the one hand between the notion of mind, spirit or soul and the idea of the father or of masculinity, and on the other hand between the notion of the body or of matter, materia, that which belongs to the mother, and the idea of the mother or of the feminine principle. The repression of the emotions and feelings relating to the mother, in our Judeo-Christian monotheism, has, in virtue of this association, produced a tendency to adopt an attitude of distrust, contempt, disgust or hostility towards the human body, the earth, and the whole material universe, with a corresponding tendency to exalt and overemphasize the spiritual elements, whether in man or in the general scheme of things. It seems very probable that a good many of the more pronouncedly idealistic tendencies in philosophy may owe much of their attractiveness in many minds to a sublimation of this reaction against the mother, while the more dogmatic and narrow forms of materialism may perhaps in their turn represent a return of the repressed feelings originally connected with the mother. Ibid. Page 145, Note 2. 30. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, translated into English with an introduction by Swami Nikhilananda, New York, 1942, page 9. 31. Ibid. pp. 21-22. 32. Standish H. O'Grady, Silva Gadelica, London. Williams and Norgate, 1892, Volume 2, pp. 370-72. Variant versions will be found in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, The Tale of the Wye of Bath, in Gower's Tale of Florent, in the mid-15th century poem, The Wedding of Sir Gawain and Dame Ragnell, and in the 17th century ballad, The Marriage of Sir Gawain. C. W. F. Bryan and Germaine Dempster, Sources and Analogues of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Chicago, 1941. 33. Guido Guinicelli di Magnano, 1230-75, of the Gentle Heart, translation by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Dante and His Circle, London. Ellis and White, edition of 1874, page 291. 34. Antiphons for the Feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, August 15th, at Vespers, from the Roman Missal. 35. Hamlet, Act 1, Scene E, LL, 129-37. 36. Sophocles, Oedipus Colonius, 1615-17. 37. Shankaracharya, Vivekachudamani, pp. 396 and 414, translated by Swami Madhavananda, Mayavati, 1932. 38. Jacobus de Voragine, The Golden Legend, LXXVI, Saint Petronilla, Virgin. Compare The Tale of Daphne, pp. 50-51. The later church, unwilling to think of Saint Peter as having begotten a child, speaks of Petronilla as his ward. 39. Ibid. CXVII. 40. Gustave Flaubert, La Tentation de Saint Antoine, La Reine de Saba. 41. Cotton Mather, Wonders of the Invisible World, Boston, 1693, page 63. 42. Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, Boston, 1742. 43. Kumaraswamy, The Dance of Shiva, New York, 1917, pp. 56-66. 44. Zimmer, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, pp. 151-75. 45. The Brahminical thread is a cotton thread worn by the members of the three upper castes, the so-called twice-born, of India. It is passed over the head and right arm, so that it rests on the left shoulder and runs across the body, chest and back, to the right hip. This symbolizes the second birth of the twice-born, the thread itself representing the threshold, or sun door, so that the twice-born is dwelling at once in time and eternity. 46. For a discussion of this syllable, see below. 47. Matthews, Op. Cit. pp. 110-13. 48. Ovid, Metamorphoses, 2, adapted from Miller, Loeb Library. 49. Kimmins, Op. Cit. page 22. 50. Wood, Op. Cit. pp. 218-19. 51. W. Lloyd Warner, A Black Civilization, New York and London, Harper and Brothers, 1937, pp. 260-85. 52. Geza Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, pp. 72-73. 53. Corin, 4-116, 4-117. 54. Sir Baldwin Spencer and F. J. Gillen, The Arunta, London, Macmillan and Company, 1927, Volume I, pp. 201-3. 55. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, pp. 49 ff. 56. Ibid, page 75. 57. Ibid, page 227, citing R. and C. Burnt, A Preliminary Report of Fieldwork in the Ulde Region, Western South Australia, Oceania 12, 1942, page 323. 58. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, pp. 227-28, citing D. Bates, The Passing of the Aborigines, 1939, pp. 41-43. 59. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, page 231. 60. R. H. Matthews, The Wollongora Ceremony, Queensland Geographical Journal, NS, 15, 1899 to 1900. Page 70. Cited by Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, page 232. 61. K. Langloh Parker, The Uala'i Tribe, 1905, pp. 72 to 73. Cited by Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, page 232. 62. John Layard, Stone Men of Malekula, London, Chatto and Windus, 1942. 63. W.F.J. Knight, in his Come Iron Gates, Oxford, B. Blackwell, 1936. 64. W.J. Perry, The Children of the Sun, New York, E.P. Dutton and Company, 1923. 65. Jane Harrison, Themis, A Study of the Social Origins of Greek Religion, Second Revised Edition, Cambridge University Press, 1927. 66. This was a question to which Campbell would return a number of times, most notably in Mythogenesis, an essay published in The Flight of the Wild Gander, 3rd edition, Novato, C.A. New World Library, 2001, ed. 67. Euripides, The Bacchae, 526 f. 68. Aeschylus, Figure 57, Noct, cited by Jane Harrison, Themis, page 61, in her discussion of the role of the bull roarer in classical and Australian rites of initiation. For an introduction to the subject of the bull roarer, see Andrew Lang, Custom and Myth, 2nd Revised Edition. London, Longmans, Green and Company, 1885, pp. 29 to 44. 69. All of these are described and discussed at length by Sir James G. Fraser in The Golden Bough. 70. Epistles to the Hebrews, 9, 13 to 14. 71. La Pie Capus de Perez Blancs, Contes, Chants et Proverbs de Basumba dans l'Afrique Orientale, Zeitschrift für Afrikanische und Oceanische Sprachen. Volume 3, Berlin, 1897, pp. 363 to 64. 72. Koran, 1031. 73. See above. 74. See above. The Basumba, Tale of the Great Chief, Death, and the Wachaga, Tale of Kayazimba, are East African peoples. The Yoruba, Tale of Edshu, inhabit the west coast nation of Nigeria. 75. Koran, 659, 6 to 60. 76. Gospel according to Luke, 2 to 7. 77. Ovid, Metamorphoses, 8, pp. 618 to 724. 78. Koran, 2 to 115. 79. Katha Upanishad, 312. 80. Gospel according to Thomas, 77. 81. Book of Job, 40, 7 to 14. 82. Ibid, 42, 5 to 6. 83. Ibid, 42, 16 to 17. 84. Leon Stein, Hasidic Music, The Chicago Jewish Forum, Volume 2, Number 1. Fall 1943, page 16. 85. Pranja Paramita Hridaya Sutra, Sacred Books of the East, Volume XLIX, Part 2, page 148, also, page 154. 86. Vajrachadika, The Diamond Cutter, 17, Ibid, page 134. 87. Compare above. 88. Amitayur Dhyana Sutra, 19, Sacred Books of the East, Volume XLIX, Part 2, pp. 182 to 83. 89. To men I am Hermes. To women I appear as Aphrodite. I bear the emblems of both my parents. Anthologia Graeca ad Fidem Codices, Volume 2. One part of him is his sire's, all else he has of his mother. Marshall, Epigrams, 4, 174. Loeb Library, Volume 2, p. 501. Ovid's account of Hermaphroditus appears in the Metamorphoses, IV, pp. 288 ff. Many classical images of Hermaphroditus have come down to us. See Hugh Hampton Young, Genital Abnormalities, Hermaphroditism, and Related Adrenal Diseases, Baltimore. Williams and Wilkins, 1937, Chapter 1, Hermaphroditism in Literature and Art. 90. Plato, Symposium, 178. 91. Book of Genesis, 127. 92. Midrash, Commentary on Genesis, Rabbah 8 to 1. 93. See above. 94. See below. 95. Compare James Joyce. In The Economy of Heaven, there are no more marriages, glorified man, an androgynous angel, being a wife unto himself. Ulysses, Modern Library Edition, page 210. 96. Sophocles, Oedipus Tyrannus. See also Ovid, Metamorphoses, 3, pp. 324 ff, 511 and 516. For other examples of the hermaphrodite as priest, god, or seer, see Herodotus, 4, 67, Rawlinson edition, volume 3, pp. 46 to 47. Theophrastus, Characters, 16.10 to 11, and J. Pinkerton's Voyage and Travels, Chapter 8, page 427, A New Account of the East Indies, by Alexander Hamilton. These are cited by Young, Op. Cit. pp. 2. End 9. 97. C. Zimmer, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, Figure 70. 98. See Figure 34. 99. C. B. Spencer and F. J. Gillen, Native Tribes of Central Australia, London, 1899. Page 263. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, pp. 164-65. The subincision produces artificially a hypospadias resembling that of a certain class of hermaphrodites. See the portrait of the hermaphrodite Marie Ange in Young, Op. Cit. Page 20. 100. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, page 94. 101. Ibid. pp. 218-19. 102. Compare the following view of the Bodhisattva Dharmakara. Out of his mouth there breathed a sweet and more than heavenly smell of sandalwood. From all the pores of his hair there arose the smell of lotus, and he was pleasing to everybody, gracious and beautiful, endowed with the fullness of the best bright color. As his body was adorned with all the good signs and marks, there arose from the pores of his hair and from the palms of his hands all sorts of precious ornaments in the shape of all kinds of flowers, incense, scents, garlands, ointments, umbrellas, flags, and banners, and in the shape of all kinds of instrumental music. And there appeared also, streaming forth from the palms of his hands, all kinds of viands and drink, food, hard and soft, and sweetmeats, and all kinds of enjoyments and pleasures. The larger Sukhavati Vyuha, 10, Sacred Books of the East, Volume XLIX, Part 2, pp. 26-27. 103. Roheim, War, Crime, and the Covenant, page 57. 104. Ibid. pp. 48-68. 105. First Book of Samuel, 1726. 106. Koran, 4-104. 107. For hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an old rule. From the Buddhist Dhammapada, 1-5, Sacred Books of the East, Volume X, Part 1, page 5, translation by F. Max Muller. 108. Gospel according to Luke, 6, 27-36. 109. Reprinted by Professor Robert Phillips, American Government and Its Problems, Houghton Mifflin Company, 1941, and by Dr. Carl Menninger, Love Against Hate, Harcourt, Brace and Company, 1942, page 211. 110. Gospel according to Matthew, 22, 37-40, Mark, 12, 28-34, Luke, 10, 25-37. Jesus is also reported to have commissioned his apostles to teach all nations, Matthew, 28-19, but not to persecute and pillage, or turn over to the secular arm those who would not hear. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents, and harmless as doves. Ibid. 10:16. 111. Gospel according to Matthew, 7-1. 112. And as troops of robbers wait for a man, so the company of priests murder in the way of consent. They make the king glad with their wickedness, and the princes with their lies. Hosea, 6-9, 7-3. 113. Menninger, Op. Cit. pp. 195-196. 114. Swami Nikhilananda, The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, New York, 1941, page 559. 115. Rumi, Mathnawi, 2, 2525. 116. The Hymn of the Final Precepts of the Great Saint and Bodhisattva Milarepa. Circa A. D. 1051-1135. From the Jetson Kabam, or Biographical History of Jetson Milarepa, according to Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup's English rendering, edited by W. Y. Evans Wentz. Tibet's Great Yogi Milarepa, Oxford University Press, 1928, page 285. 117. The Hymn of the Yogic Precepts of Milarepa, Ibid. Page 273. 118. Evans Wentz, Hymn of Milarepa in Praise of His Teacher, page 137. 119. The same idea is frequently expressed in the Upanishads. Viz. This self gives itself to that self gives itself to this self. Thus they gain each other. In this form he gains yonder world, in that form he experiences this world. Aitareya Aranyaka, 2, 3, 7. It is known also to the mystics of Islam. 30 years the transcendent God was my mirror, now I am my own mirror. I.e., that which I was I am no more, the transcendent God is his own mirror. I say that I am my own mirror. 'Tis God that speaks with my tongue, and I have vanished. Bayezid, as cited in the Legacy of Islam, T. W. Arnold and A. Guillaume, editors, Oxford Press, 1931, page 216. 120. I came forth from Bayezid Ness as a snake from its skin. Then I looked. I saw that lover, beloved, and love are one, for in the world of unity all can be one. Bayezid, Locke, Cit. 121. Book of Hosea, 6, 1-3. 122. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 1, 4, 3. See below. 123. Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, Hinduism and Buddhism, New York, The Philosophical Library, no date, page 63. 124. Sigmund Freud, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, translated by James Strachey, Standard Edition, 18. London, The Hogarth Press, 1955. See also Karl Menninger, Love Against Hate, page 262. 125. Vajracchedika Sutra, 32. See, Sacred Books of the East, Op. Cit. Page 144. 126. The Smaller Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, Ibid. Page 153. 127. Nagarjuna, Madhyamika Shastra. What is immortal and what is mortal are harmoniously blended, for they are not one, nor are they separate, Ashvaghosha. This view, writes Dr. Kumaraswamy, citing these texts, is expressed with dramatic force in the aphorism Yas Klaises So Bodhi, Yas Samsaras Tad Nirvanam, that which is sin is also wisdom, the realm of becoming is also nirvana, Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, Buddha and the Gospel of Buddhism, New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1916, page 245. 128. Bhagavad Gita, 629, 631. This represents the perfect fulfillment of what Evelyn Underhill termed the goal of the mystic way, the true unit of life, the state of divine fecundity, deification, Op. Cit. Passum. Underhill, however, like Professor Toynbee, makes the popular mistake of supposing that this ideal is peculiar to Christianity. It is safe to say, writes Professor Samany, that Occidental judgment has been falsified, up to the present, by the need for self-assertion. Alfred Samany, Die Rassenfrage in der Indienforschung, Sozialistische Mannschaft, 8, Berlin, 1926, page 534. 129. Kumaraswamy, Hinduism and Buddhism, page 74. 130. C. etc. Werner, A Dictionary of Chinese Mythology, Shanghai, 1932, page 163. 131. C. Okakura Kakuzo, The Book of Tea, New York, 1906. See also Daisetsu Taitaro Suzuki, Essays in Zen Buddhism, London, 1927, and Lafcadio Hearn, Japan, New York, 1904. See also Campbell's exploration of the symbolism of the tea ceremony in Myths of Light, Eastern Metaphors of the Eternal, edited by David Cudler, Novato, CA. New World Library, 2003, pp. 133-36. ed. 132. Morris Edward Opler, Myths and Tales of the Jicarilla Apache Indians, Memoirs of the American Folklore Society, Volume 31, 1938, page 110. 133. Compared to the Chinese concept of yin-yang. 134, see above. 135, see above. 136. See Zimmer, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, pp. 210-14. 137. Compare the drum of creation in the hand of the Hindu dancing Shiva. 138. Curtin, Op. Cit. pp. 106-7. 139. See Melanie Klein, The Psychoanalysis of Children, The International Psychoanalytical Library, No. 27, 1937. 140. Roheim, War, Crime, and the Covenant, pp. 137-38. 141. Roheim, The Origin and Function of Culture, page 50. 142. Ibid, pp. 48-50. 143. Ibid, page 50. Compare the indestructibility of the Siberian shaman, drawing coals out of the fire with his bare hands and beating his legs with an axe. 144. See Fraser's discussion of the external soul, Op. Cit. pp. 667-91. 145. Ibid, page 671. 146. Pierce, Dreams and Personality, page 298. 147. The Descent of the Sun, in F. W. Bain, A Digit of the Moon, New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1910, pp. 213-325. 148. Roheim, The Eternal Ones of the Dream, page 237. This talisman is the so-called Jurunga, or Churinga, of the young man's totem ancestor. The youth received another Jurunga at the time of his circumcision, representing his maternal totem ancestor. Still earlier, at the time of his birth, a protective Jurunga was placed in his cradle. The bull roarer is a variety of Jurunga. The Jurunga, writes Dr. Roheim, is a material double, and certain supernatural beings most intimately connected with the Jurunga in Central Australian belief are invisible doubles of the natives. Like the Jurunga, these supernaturals are called the Arpuna Maborka, other body, of the real human beings whom they protect, Ibid, page 98. 149, Book of Isaiah, 66, 10-12. 150. Ginsberg, Op. Cit. Volume I, pp. 20, 26-30. See the extensive notes on the Messianic Banquet in Ginsberg, Volume V, pp. 43-46. 151. Dante, Paradiso, 2, 1-9. Translation by Norden, Op. Cit. Volume 3, page 10. By permission of the Houghton Mifflin Company, publishers. 152. Ramayana, I. 45. Mahabharata, I. 18. Matsya Purana, 249-51, and many other texts. C. Zimmer, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, pp. 105 ff. 153. Marco Pallis, Peaks and Lamas, 4th edition. London. Castle and Company, 1946, page 324. 154. Sri Chakra Sambhara Tantra, translated from the Tibetan by Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup, edited by Sir John Woodruff, pseudonym Arthur Avalon. Volume 7 of Tantric Texts. London, 1919, page 41. Should doubts arise as to the divinity of these visualized deities, the text continues, one should say, this goddess is only the recollection of the body, and remember that the deities constitute the path, luck, cit. See Tantra and Tantric Buddhism. 155. Compare, e.g., C.G. Jung, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Eridge. 1934. Collected Works, Volume 9, Part I, New York and London, 1959. There are perhaps many, writes Dr. J.C. Flugel, who would still retain the notion of a quasi-anthropomorphic father god as an extra-mental reality, even though the purely mental origin of such a god has become apparent. The Psychoanalytic Study of the Family, page 236. 156. Paradiso, 33, 82 ff. 157, see above. 158. J. F. Stimson, The Legends of Maui and Tahaki, Bernice P. Bishop Museum Bulletin, number 127. Honolulu, 1934, pp. 19-21. 159. Bruno Meissner, Ein altbabylonisches Fragment des Gilgamesepos, Mitteilungen der Vorderasiatischen Gesellschaft, 7, 1, Berlin, 1902, page 9. 160. See, for instance, the Katha Upanishad, 121, 23-25. 161. The above rendering is based on P. Jensen, Assyrisch-Babylonisch Mythen und Epen, Quellenschriftliche Bibliothek, v. I. Berlin, 1900, pp. 116-273. The verses quoted appear on pp. 223, 251, 251-53. Jensen's version is a line-for-line translation of the principal extant text, and a Syrian version from King Ashurbanipal's library, 668-626b, c. Fragments of the very much older Babylonian version and still more ancient Sumerian original, 3rd millennium b. c. have also been discovered and deciphered. 162. Ko Hung, also known as Pao Pu Su, Napion, Chapter 7. Translation quoted from Obed Simon Johnson, A Study of Chinese Alchemy, Shanghai, 1928, page 63. Ko Hung evolved several other very interesting receipts, one bestowing a body, buoyant and luxurious, another the ability to walk on water. For a discussion of the place of Ko Hung in Chinese philosophy, see Alfred Fork, Ko Hung, Der Philosoph und Alchemist, Archive für Geschichte der Philosophie, XLI, 1-2, Berlin, 1932, pp. 115-26. 163. Herbert A. Giles, A Chinese Biographical Dictionary, London and Shanghai, 1898, page 372. 164. A Tantric Aphorism. 165. Lao Zi, Tao Te Ching, 16, translation by Dwight Goddard, Lao Tzu's Tao and Wu Wei, New York, 1919, page 18. Compare to the concept of yin-yang. 166. Paradiso, 33, 49-57, translation by Norden, Op. Cit, Volume 3, pp. 253-54, by permission of Hoden Mifflin Company, Publishers. 167. Kena Upanishad, 1-3, translation by Swami Sharvananda, Sri Ramakrishna Math, Mylapore, Madras, 1932. 168. Poetic Edda, Hovamal, 139, translation by Henry Adams Bellows, The American Scandinavian Foundation, New York, 1923. 169. Jataka, Introduction, I. 75, reprinted by permission of the publishers from Henry Clark Warren, Buddhism in Translations, Harvard Oriental Series 3, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, 1896, pp. 82-83. Figure 44. The Return of the Prodigal, Oil on Canvas, Holland, A. D. 1662. Chapter E. Return 1. Refusal of the Return. When the hero quest has been accomplished, through penetration to the source, or through the grace of some male or female, human or animal personification, the adventurer still must return with his life-transmuting trophy. The full round, the norm of the monomyth, requires that the hero shall now begin the labor of bringing the runes of wisdom, the golden fleece, or his sleeping princess back into the kingdom of humanity, where the boon may redound to the renewing of the community, the nation, the planet, or the 10,000 worlds. But the responsibility has been frequently refused. Even the Buddha, after his triumph, doubted whether the message of realization could be communicated, and saints are reported to have passed away while in the supernal ecstasy. Numerous indeed are the heroes fabled to have taken up residence forever in the blessed isle of the Unaging goddess of immortal being. A moving tale is told of an ancient Hindu warrior king named Muchukunda. He was born from his father's left side, the father having swallowed by mistake a fertility potion that the Brahmins had prepared for his wife. Asterisk, and in keeping with the promising symbolism of this miracle, the motherless marvel, fruit of the male womb, grew to be such a king among kings that when the gods, at one period, were suffering defeat in their perpetual contest with the demons, they called upon him for help. He assisted them to a mighty victory, and they, in their divine pleasure, granted him the realization of his highest wish. But what should such a king, himself almost omnipotent, desire? What greatest boon of boons could be conceived of by such a master among men? King Muchukunda, so runs the story, was very tired after his battle. All he asked was that he might be granted sleep without end, and that any person chancing to arouse him should be burned to a crisp by the first glance of his eye. The boon was bestowed. In a cavern chamber, deep within the womb of the mountain, King Muchukunda retired to sleep, and there slumbered through the revolving eons. Individuals, peoples, civilizations, world ages, came into being out of the void and dropped back into it again, while the old king, in his state of subconscious bliss, endured. Timeless as the Freudian unconscious beneath the dramatic time world of our fluctuating ego experience, the old mountain man, the drinker of deep sleep, lived on and on. His awakening came, but with a surprising turn that throws into new perspective the whole problem of the hero circuit, as well as the mystery of the mighty king's request for sleep as the highest conceivable boon. Vishnu, the Lord of the world, had become incarnate in the person of a beautiful youth named Krishna, who having saved the land of India from a tyrannical race of demons, had assumed the throne. And he had been ruling in utopian peace, when a horde of barbarians suddenly invaded from the northwest. Krishna the king went against them, but in keeping with his divine nature, won the victory playfully, by simple ruse. Unarmed and garlanded with lotuses, he came out of his stronghold and tempted the enemy king to pursue and catch him, then dodged into a cave. When the barbarian followed, he discovered someone lying there in the chamber, asleep. Oh, thought he, so he has lured me here and now he feigns to be a harmless sleeper. He kicked the figure lying on the ground before him, and it stirred. It was King Muchukunda. The figure rose and the eyes that had been closed for unnumbered cycles of creation, world history, and dissolution, opened slowly to the light. The first glance that went forth struck the enemy king, who burst into a torch of flame and was reduced immediately to a smoking heap of ash. Muchukunda turned and the second glance struck the garlanded, beautiful youth, whom the awakened old king straightway recognized by his radiance as an incarnation of God. And Muchukunda bowed before his savior with the following prayer. My Lord God, when I lived and wrought as a man, I lived and wrought, straying restlessly. Through many lives, birth after birth, I sought and suffered, nowhere knowing cease or rest. Distress I took for joy. Mirages appearing over the desert I mistook for refreshing waters. Delights I grasped, and what I obtained was misery. Kingly power and earthly possession, riches and might, friends and sons, wife and followers, everything that lures the senses. I wanted them all, because I believed that these would bring me beatitude. But the moment anything was mine it changed its nature, and became as a burning fire. Then I found my way into the company of the gods, and they welcomed me as a companion. But where, still, surcease? Where rest? The creatures of this world, gods included, are all tricked, my Lord God, by your playful ruses. That is why they continue in their futile round of birth, life agony, old age, and death. Between lives, they confront the Lord of the dead and are forced to endure hells of every degree of pitiless pain. And it all comes from you. My Lord God, deluded by your playful ruses, I too was a prey of the world, wandering in a labyrinth of error, netted in the meshes of ego consciousness. Now, therefore, I take refuge in your presence, the boundless, the adorable, desiring only freedom from it all. When Muchukunda stepped from his cave, he saw that men, since his departure, had become reduced in stature. He was as a giant among them. And so he departed from them again, retreated to the highest mountains, and there dedicated himself to the ascetic practices that should finally release him from his last attachment to the forms of being. 1. Muchukunda, in other words, instead of returning, decided to retreat 1 degree still further from the world. And who shall say that his decision was altogether without reason? Figure 45a. Gorgon's sister pursuing Perseus, who is fleeing with the head of Medusa, red figure Amphora, Greece, 5th century B.C. Figure 45b. Perseus fleeing with the head of Medusa in his wallet, red figure Amphora, Greece, 5th century B.C. 2. The magic flight. If the hero in his triumph wins the blessing of the goddess or the god and is then explicitly commissioned to return to the world with some elixir for the restoration of society, the final stage of his adventure is supported by all the powers of his supernatural patron. On the other hand, if the trophy has been attained against the opposition of its guardian, or if the hero's wish to return to the world has been resented by the gods or demons, then the last stage of the mythological round becomes a lively, often comical, pursuit. This flight may be complicated by marvels of magical obstruction and evasion. The Welsh tell, for instance, of a hero, Gwan Bach, who found himself in the land under waves. Specifically, he was at the bottom of Lake Bala in Merionethshire in the north of Wales. And there lived at the bottom of this lake an ancient giant, Tegid the Bald, together with his wife, Caradwen. The latter, in one of her aspects, was a patroness of grain and fertile crops, and in another, a goddess of poetry and letters. She was the owner of an immense kettle and desired to prepare therein a brew of science and inspiration. With the aid of necromantic books she contrived a black concoction which she then set over a fire to brew for a year, at the end of which period 3 blessed drops should be obtained of the grace of inspiration. And she put our hero, Gwan Bach, to stir the cauldron, and a blind man named Morda to keep the fire kindled beneath it, and she charged them that they should not suffer it to cease boiling for the space of a year and a day. And she herself, according to the books of the astronomers, and in planetary hours, gathered every day of all charm-bearing herbs. And one day, towards the end of the year, as Caradwen was culling plants and making incantations, it chanced that 3 drops of the charmed liquor flew out of the cauldron and fell upon the finger of Gwan Bach. And by reason of their great heat he put his finger in his mouth, and the instant he put those marvel-working drops into his mouth he foresaw everything that was to come, and perceived that his chief care must be to guard against the wiles of Caradwen, for vast was her skill. And in very great fear he fled towards his own land. And the cauldron burst in two, because all the liquor within it except the 3 charm-bearing drops was poisonous, so that the horses of Gwydno Garanir were poisoned by the water of the stream into which the liquor of the cauldron ran, and the confluence of that stream was called the poison of the horses of Gwydno from that time forth. Thereupon came in Caradwen and saw all the toil of the whole year lost. And she seized a billet of wood and struck the blind Morda on the head until one of his eyes fell out upon his cheek. And he said, "Wrongfully hast thou disfigured me, for I am innocent. Thy loss was not because of me." "Thou speakest truth," said Caradwen, "it was Gwan Bach who robbed me." Figure 46. Caradwen in the shape of a greyhound pursuing Gwan Bach in the shape of a hare, lithograph, Britain, A.D. 1877. And she went forth after him, running. And he saw her, and changed himself into a hare and fled. But she changed herself into a greyhound and turned him. And he ran towards a river, and became a fish. And she in the form of an otter bitch chased him under the water, until he was fain to turn himself into a bird of the air. She, as a hawk, followed him and gave him no rest in the sky. And just as she was about to stoop upon him, and he was in fear of death, he espied a heap of winnowed wheat on the floor of a barn, and he dropped among the wheat, and turned himself into one of the grains. Then she transformed herself into a high-crested black hen, and went to the wheat and scratched it with her feet, and found him out and swallowed him. And, as the story says, she bore him 9 months, and when she was delivered of him, she could not find it in her heart to kill him, by reason of his beauty. So she wrapped him in a leathern bag, and cast him into the sea to the mercy of God, on the 29th day of April, 2. The tale of Gwan Bach comes to us through Taliesin, in the Mabinogion, a collection of Welsh romances translated by Lady Charlotte Guest in 4 volumes between 1838 and 1849. Taliesin, chief of the bards of the West, may have been an actual historical personage of the 6th century A.D., contemporary with the chieftain who became the King Arthur of later romance. The bard's legend and poems survive in a 13th century manuscript, the Book of Taliesin, which is one of the 4 ancient books of Wales. A Mabinogi, Welsh, is a bard's apprentice. The term Mabinogi, juvenile instruction, denotes the traditional material, myths, legends, poems, etc., taught to a Mabinogi, and which it was his duty to acquire by heart. Mabinogion, the plural of Mabinogi, was the name given by Guest to her translation of 11 romances from the ancient books. The bardic lore of Wales, like that of Scotland and Ireland, descends from a very old and abundant pagan Celtic fund of myth. This was transformed and revivified by the Christian missionaries and chroniclers, 5th century A.D., following, who recorded the old stories and sought painstakingly to coordinate them with the Bible. During the 10th century, a brilliant period of romance production, centering primarily in Ireland, converted the inheritance into an important contemporary force. Celtic bards went out to the courts of Christian Europe. Celtic themes were rehearsed by the pagan Scandinavian skalds. A great part of our European fairy lore, as well as the foundation of the Arthurian tradition, traces back to this first great creative period of Occidental romance. 3. The flight is a favorite episode of the folktale, where it is developed under many lively forms. The Buryat of Irkutsk, Siberia, for example, declare that Morgan Kara, their first shaman, was so competent that he could bring back souls from the dead. And so the Lord of the Dead complained to the high god of heaven, and God decided to pose the shaman a test. He got possession of the soul of a certain man and slipped it into a bottle, covering the opening with the ball of his thumb. The man grew ill, and his relatives sent for Morgan Kara. The shaman looked everywhere for the missing soul. He searched the forest, the waters, the mountain gorges, the land of the dead, and at last mounted, sitting on his drum, to the world above, where again he was forced to search for a long time. Presently he observed that the high god of heaven was keeping a bottle covered with the ball of his thumb, and, studying the circumstance, perceived that inside the bottle was the very soul he had come to find. The wily shaman changed himself into a wasp. He flew at God and gave him such a hot sting on the forehead that the thumb jerked from the opening and the captive got away. Then the next thing God knew, there was this shaman, Morgan Kara, sitting on his drum again and going down to earth with the recovered soul. The flight in this case, however, was not entirely successful. Becoming terribly angry, God immediately diminished the power of the shaman forever by splitting his drum in two. And so that is why shaman drums, which originally, according to this story of the Buried, were fitted with 2 heads of skin, from that day to this have had only one. 4. A popular variety of the magic flight is that in which objects are left behind to speak for the fugitive and thus delay pursuit. The New Zealand Maori tell of a fisherman who one day came home to find that his wife had swallowed their 2 sons. She was lying groaning on the floor. He asked her what the trouble was, and she declared that she was ill. He demanded to know where the 2 boys were, and she told him they had gone away. But he knew that she was lying. With his magic, he caused her to disgorge them. They came out alive and whole. Then that man was afraid of his wife, and he determined to escape from her as soon as he could, together with the boys. When the ogress went to fetch water, the man, by his magic, caused the water to decrease and retreat ahead of her, so that she had to go a considerable way. Then by gestures he instructed the huts, the clumps of trees growing near the village, the filth dump, and the temple on top of the hill to answer for him when his wife should return and call. He made away with the boys to his canoe, and they hoisted sail. The woman came back, and, not finding anyone about, began to call. First the filth pit replied. She moved in that direction and called again. The houses answered, then the trees. One after another, the various objects in the neighborhood responded to her, and she ran, increasingly bewildered, in every direction. She became weak and began to pant and sob and then, at last, realized what had been done to her. She hastened to the temple on the hilltop and peered out to sea, where the canoe was a mere speck on the horizon. 5. Another well-known variety of the magic flight is one in which a number of delaying obstacles are tossed behind by the wildly fleeing hero. A little brother and sister were playing by a spring, and as they did so suddenly tumbled in. There was a water hag down there, and this water hag said, "Now I have you. Now you shall work your heads off for me." And she carried them away with her. She gave to the little girl a tangle of filthy flax to spin and made her fetch water in a bottomless tub. The boy had to chop a tree with a blunt axe, and all they ever had to eat were stone-hard lumps of dough. So at last the children became so impatient that they waited until one Sunday, when the hag had gone to church and escaped. When church let out, the hag discovered that her birds had flown, and so made after them with mighty bounds. But the children espied her from afar, and the little girl threw back a hairbrush, which immediately turned into a big brush mountain with thousands and thousands of bristles over which the hag found it very difficult to climb. Nevertheless, she finally appeared. As soon as the children saw her, the boy threw back a comb, which immediately turned into a big comb mountain with 1,000 times 1,000 spikes. But the hag knew how to catch hold of these, and at last she made her way through. Then the little girl threw back a mirror, and this turned into a mirror mountain, which was so smooth that the hag was unable to get over. Thought she, "I shall hurry back home and get my axe and chop the mirror mountain in 2. But by the time she got back and demolished the glass, the children were long since far away, and the water hag had to trudge back again to her spring. 6. The powers of the abyss are not to be challenged lightly. In the Orient, a great point is made of the danger of undertaking the psychologically disturbing practices of yoga without competent supervision. The meditations of the postulant have to be adjusted to his progress, so that the imagination may be defended at every step by devatas, envisioned, adequate deities, until the moment comes for the prepared spirit to step alone beyond. As Dr. Jung has very wisely observed, the incomparably useful function of the dogmatic symbol is that it protects a person from a direct experience of God as long as he does not mischievously expose himself. But if he leaves home and family, lives too long alone, and gazes too deeply into the dark mirror, then the awful event of the meeting may befall him. Yet even then the traditional symbol, come to full flower through the centuries, may operate like a healing draught and divert the fatal incursion of the living Godhead into the hallowed spaces of the Church. 7. The magic objects tossed behind by the panic-ridden hero, protective interpretations, principles, symbols, rationalizations, anything, delay and absorb the power of the started hound of heaven, permitting the adventurer to come back into his fold safe and with perhaps a boon. But the toll required is not always slight. One of the most shocking of the obstacle flights is that of the Greek hero Jason. He had set forth to win the Golden Fleece. Putting to sea in the magnificent Argo with a great company of warriors, he had sailed in the direction of the Black Sea, and, though delayed by many fabulous dangers, arrived, at last, miles beyond the Bosporus, at the city and palace of King Aedes. Behind the palace was the grove and tree of the dragon-guarded prize. Now the daughter of the king, Medea, conceived an overpowering passion for the illustrious foreign visitor and, when her father imposed an impossible task as the price of the Golden Fleece, compounded charms that enabled him to succeed. The task was to plow a certain field, employing bulls of flaming breath and brazen feet, then to sow the field with dragon's teeth and slay the armed men who should immediately spring into being. But with his body and armor anointed with Medea's charm, Jason mastered the bulls, and when the army sprang from the dragon seed, he tossed a stone into their midst, which turned them face to face, and they slew each other to the man. The infatuated young woman conducted Jason to the oak from which hung the fleece. The guarding dragon was distinguished by a crest, a three-forked tongue, and nastily hooked fangs, but with the juice of a certain herb the couple put the formidable monster to sleep. Then Jason snatched the prize. Medea ran with him, and the Argo put to sea. But the king was soon in swift pursuit. And when Medea perceived that his sails were cutting down their lead, she persuaded Jason to kill Apsardos, her younger brother whom she had carried off, and toss the pieces of the dismembered body into the sea. This forced King Aedes, her father, to put about, rescue the fragments, and go ashore to give them decent burial. Meanwhile the Argo ran with the wind and passed from his ken. 8. In the Japanese records of ancient matters appears another harrowing tale, but of very different import. That of the descent to the underworld of the primeval All-Father Izanagi, to recover from the land of the Yellow Stream his deceased sister's spouse Izanami. She met him at the door to the lower world, and he said to her, "Thine augustness, my lovely younger sister. The lands that I and thou made are not yet finished making, so come back." She replied, "Lamentable indeed that thou camest not sooner. I have eaten of the food of the land of the Yellow Stream. Nevertheless, as I am overpowered by the honor of the entry here of thine augustness, my lovely elder brother, I wish to return. Moreover, I will discuss the matter particularly with the deities of the Yellow Stream. Be careful, do not look at me." She retired into the palace, but as she tarried there very long, he could not wait. He broke off one of the end teeth of the comb that was stuck in the august left bunch of his hair, and, lighting it as a little torch, he went in and looked. What he saw were maggots swarming, and Izanami rotting. Aghast at the sight, Izanagi fled back. Izanami said, "Thou hast put me to shame." Izanami sent the ugly female of the nether world in pursuit. Izanagi in full flight took the black headdress from his head and cast it down. Instantly it turned into grapes, and, while his pursuer paused to eat them, he continued on his rapid way. But she resumed the pursuit and gained on him. He took and broke the multitudinous and close-toothed comb in the right bunch of his hair and cast it down. Instantly it turned into bamboo sprouts, and, while she pulled them up and ate them, he fled. Then his younger sister sent in pursuit of him the 8 thunder deities with 1,500 warriors of the Yellow Stream. Drawing the 10-grasp saber that was augustly girded on him, he fled, brandishing this behind him. But the warriors still pursued. Reaching the frontier pass between the world of the living and the land of the Yellow Stream, he took 3 peaches that were growing there, waited, and when the army came against him, hurled them. The peaches from the world of the living smote the warriors of the land of the Yellow Stream, who turned and fled. Her augustness Izanami, last of all, came out herself. So he drew up a rock which it would take 1,000 men to lift, and with it blocked up the pass. And with the rock between them, they stood opposite to one another and exchanged leave-takings. Izanami said, "My lovely elder brother, thine augustness. If thou dost behave like this, henceforth I shall cause to die every day 1,000 of thy people in thy realm." Izanagi answered, "My lovely younger sister, thine augustness. If thou dost so, then I will cause every day 1,500 women to give birth." 9. Having moved a step beyond the creative sphere of All-Father Izanagi into the field of dissolution, Izanami had sought to protect her brother husband. When he had seen more than he could bear, he lost his innocence of death but, with his august will to live, drew up as a mighty rock that protecting veil which we all have held, ever since, between our eyes and the grave. The Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, and hundreds of analogous tales throughout the world, suggest, as does this ancient legend of the farthest east, that in spite of the failure recorded, a possibility exists of a return of the lover with his lost love from beyond the terrible threshold. It is always some little fault, some slight yet critical symptom of human frailty, that makes impossible the open interrelationship between the worlds, so that one is tempted to believe, almost, that if a small, marring accident could be avoided, all would be well. In the Polynesian versions of the romance, however, where the fleeing couple usually escape, and in the Greek satyr play of Alcestis, where we also have a happy return, the effect is not reassuring, but only superhuman. The myths of failure touch us with the tragedy of life, but those of success only with their own incredibility. And yet, if the monomyth is to fulfill its promise, not human failure or superhuman success but human success is what we shall have to be shown. That is the problem of the crisis of the threshold of the return. We shall first consider it in the superhuman symbols and then seek the practical teaching for historic man. Figure 47. The Resurrection of Osiris, carved stone, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 282 to 145 B.C. 3. Rescue from without. The hero may have to be brought back from his supernatural adventure by assistance from without. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him. For the bliss of the deep abode is not lightly abandoned in favor of the self-scattering of the wakened state. Who having cast off the world, we read, would desire to return again? He would be only there. 10. And yet, in so far as one is alive, life will call. Society is jealous of those who remain away from it, and will come knocking at the door. If the hero, like Muchukunda, is unwilling, the disturber suffers an ugly shock, but on the other hand, if the summoned one is only delayed, sealed in by the beatitude of the state of perfect being, which resembles death, an apparent rescue is effected, and the adventurer returns. When Raven of the Eskimo tail had darted with his fire sticks into the belly of the whale cow, he discovered himself at the entrance of a handsome room, at the farther end of which burned a lamp. He was surprised to see sitting there a beautiful girl. The room was dry and clean, the whale's spine supporting the ceiling and the ribs forming the walls. From a tube that ran along the backbone, oil dripped slowly into the lamp. When Raven entered the room, the woman looked up and cried, "How did you get here? You are the first man to enter this place." Raven told what he had done, and she bade him take a seat on the opposite side of the room. This woman was the soul, Inua, of the whale. She spread a meal before the visitor, gave him berries and oil, and told him, meanwhile, how she had gathered the berries the year before. Raven remained 4 days as guest of the Inua in the belly of the whale, and during the entire period was trying to ascertain what kind of tube that could be, running along the ceiling. Every time the woman left the room, she forbade him to touch it. But now, when she again went out, he walked over to the lamp, stretched out his claw, and caught on it a big drop, which he licked off with his tongue. It was so sweet that he repeated the act, and then proceeded to catch drop after drop, as fast as they fell. Presently, however, his greed found this too slow, and so he reached up, broke off a piece of the tube, and ate it. Hardly had he done so, when a great gush of oil poured into the room, extinguished the light, and the chamber itself began to roll heavily back and forth. This rolling went on for 4 days. Raven was almost dead with fatigue and with the terrible noise that stormed around him all the while. But then everything quieted down and the room lay still, for Raven had broken one of the heart arteries and the whale cow had died. The Inua never returned. The body of the whale was washed ashore. But now Raven was a prisoner. While he pondered what he should do, he heard 2 men talking, up on the back of the animal, and they decided to summon all the people from the village to help with the whale. Very soon they had cut a hole in the upper part of the great body. When it was large enough, and all the people had gone off with pieces of meat to carry them high up on the shore, Raven stepped out unnoticed. But no sooner had he reached the ground than he remembered he had left his fire sticks within. He took off his coat and mask, and pretty soon the people saw a small, black man, wrapped up in a queer animal skin approaching them. They looked at him curiously. The man offered to help, rolled up his sleeves, and set to work. In a little while, one of the people working in the interior of the whale shouted, "Look what I have found. Fire sticks in the belly of the whale." Raven said, but this is bad. My daughter once told me that when fire sticks are found inside a whale that people have cut open, many of these people will die. I'm for running." He rolled down his sleeves again and made away. The people hurried to follow his example. And so that was how Raven, who then doubled back, had, for a time, the whole feast to himself. 11. Shinto, the way of the gods, the tradition native to the Japanese is distinguished from the imported Butsuda, or way of the Buddha, is a way of devotion to the guardians of life and custom, local spirits, ancestral powers, heroes, the divine king, one's living parents, and one's living children, as distinguished from the powers that yield release from the round, bodhisattvas and Buddhas. The way of worship is primarily that of preserving and cultivating purity of heart. What is ablution? It is not merely cleansing the body with holy water, but following the right and moral way. 12. What pleases the deity is virtue and sincerity, not any number of material offerings. 13. Amaterasu, ancestress of the royal house, is the chief divinity of the numerous folk pantheon, yet herself only the highest manifestation of the unseen, transcendent yet immanent, universal God. The 800 myriads of gods are but differing manifestations of one unique deity, Kunatakadachi no Kami, the eternally standing divine being of the earth, the great unity of all things in the universe, the primordial being of heaven and earth, eternally existing from the beginning to the end of the world. 14. What deity does Amaterasu worship in abstinence in the plane of high heaven? She worships her own self within as a deity, endeavoring to cultivate divine virtue in her own person by means of inner purity and thus becoming one with the deity. 15. Since the deity is immanent in all things are to be regarded as divine, from the pots and pans of the kitchen to the emperor. This is Shinto, the way of the gods. The emperor being in the highest position receives the greatest reverence, but not reverence different in kind from that bestowed upon all things. The awe-inspiring deity manifests itself, even in the single leaf of a tree or a delicate blade of grass. 16. The function of reverence in Shinto is to honor the deity in all things. The function of purity to sustain its manifestation in oneself, following the august model of the divine self-worship of the goddess Amaterasu. With the unseen God who seeth all secret things in the silence, the heart of the man sincere communes from the earth below. From a poem by the Emperor Meiji. 17. One of the most important and delightful of the myths of the Shinto tradition of Japan, already old when chronicled in the 8th century A.D. in the Records of Ancient Matters, is that of the drawing forth of the beautiful sun goddess Amaterasu from a heavenly rock dwelling during the critical first period of the world. This is an example in which the rescued one is somewhat reluctant. The storm god Susanoo, the brother of Amaterasu, had been misbehaving inexcusably. And though she had tried every means to appease him and had stretched forgiveness far beyond the limit, he continued to destroy her rice fields and to pollute her institutions. As a final insult, he broke a hole in the top of her weaving hall and let fall through it a heavenly piebald horse which he had flayed with a backward flaying, at sight of which all the ladies of the goddess, who were busily weaving the august garments of the deities, were so much alarmed that they died of fear. Amaterasu, terrified at the sight, retired into a heavenly cave, closed the door behind her and made it fast. This was a terrible thing for her to do, for the permanent disappearance of the sun would have meant as much as the end of the universe, the end, before it had even properly begun. With her disappearance the whole plain of high heaven and all the central land of reed plains became dark. Evil spirits ran riot through the world, numerous portents of woe arose, and the voices of the myriad of deities were like unto the flies in the fifth moon as they swarmed. Therefore the 8 millions of gods assembled in a divine assembly in the bed of the tranquil river of heaven and bid one of their number, the deity named Thought Includer, to devise a plan. As the result of their consultation, many things of divine efficacy were produced, among them a mirror, a sword, and cloth offerings. A great tree was set up and decorated with jewels. Cocks were brought that they might keep up a perpetual crowing. Bonfires were lit. Grand liturgies were recited. The mirror, 8 feet long, was tied to the middle branches of the tree. And a merry, noisy dance was performed by a young goddess called Uzume. The 8 millions of divinities were so amused that their laughter filled the air, and the plain of high heaven shook. Figure 48. Amaterasu emerges from the cave, woodblock print, Japan, A.D. 1860. The sun goddess in the cave heard the lively uproar and was amazed. She was curious to know what was going on. Slightly opening the door of the heavenly rock dwelling, she spoke thus from within. I thought that owing to my retirement the plain of heaven would be dark, and likewise the central land of reed plains would all be dark. How then is it that Uzume makes merry, and that likewise the 8 millions of gods all laugh? Then Uzume spoke, saying, We rejoice and are glad because there is a deity more illustrious than thine augustness. While she was thus speaking, 2 of the divinities pushed forward the mirror and respectfully showed it to the sun goddess, Amaterasu. Whereupon she, more and more astonished, gradually came forth from the door and gazed upon it. A powerful god took her august hand and drew her out, whereupon another stretched a rope of straw, called the Shimenawa, behind her, across the entrance, saying, Thou must not go back further in than this. Thereupon both the plain of high heaven and the central land of reed plains again were light. 18. The sun may now retreat, for a time, every night, as does life itself, in refreshing sleep, but by the august Shimenawa she is prevented from disappearing permanently. The motif of the sun as a goddess, instead of as a god, is a rare and precious survival from an archaic, apparently once widely diffused, mythological context. The great maternal divinity of South Arabia is the feminine sun, Alat. The word in German for the sun, die Sonne, is feminine. Throughout Siberia, as well as in North America, scattered stories survive of a female sun. And in the fairy tale of Red Riding Hood, who was eaten by the wolf but rescued from its belly by the hunter, we may have a remote echo of the same adventure as that of Amaterasu. Traces remain in many lands, but only in Japan do we find the once great mythology still effective in civilization, for the emperor is a direct descendant of the grandson of Amaterasu, and as ancestress of the royal house she is honored as one of the supreme divinities of the national tradition of Shinto. In her adventures may be sensed a different world feeling from that of the now better-known mythologies of the solar god. A certain tenderness toward the lovely gift of light, a gentle gratitude for things made visible, such as must once have distinguished the religious mood of many peoples. The mirror, the sword, and the tree, we recognize. The mirror, reflecting the goddess and drawing her forth from the august repose of her divine non-manifestation, is symbolic of the world, the field of the reflected image. Therein divinity is pleased to regard its own glory, and this pleasure is itself inducement to the act of manifestation or creation. The sword is the counterpart of the thunderbolt. The tree is the world axis in its wish-fulfilling, fruitful aspect, the same as that displayed in Christian homes at the season of the winter solstice, which is the moment of the rebirth or return of the sun, a joyous custom inherited from the Germanic paganism that has given to the modern German language its feminine Sonne. The dance of Uzume and the uproar of the gods belong to carnival, the world left topsy-turvy by the withdrawal of the supreme divinity, but joyous for the coming renewal. And the Shimenawa, the august rope of straw that was stretched behind the goddess when she reappeared, symbolizes the graciousness of the miracle of the light's return. This Shimenawa is one of the most conspicuous, important, and silently eloquent of the traditional symbols of the folk religion of Japan. Hung above the entrances of the temples, festooned along the streets of the New Year festival, it denotes the renovation of the world at the threshold of the return. If the Christian cross is the most telling symbol of the mythological passage into the abyss of death, the Shimenawa is the simplest sign of the resurrection. The two represent the mystery of the boundary between the worlds, the existent-non-existent line. Amaterasu is an oriental sister of the great Inanna, the supreme goddess of the ancient Sumerian cuneiform temple tablets, whose descent we have already followed into the lower world. Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte, Aphrodite, Venus. Those were the names she bore in the successive culture periods of the Occidental development, associated, not with the sun, but with the planet that carries her name, and at the same time with the moon, the heavens, and the fruitful earth. In Egypt she became the goddess of the dog star, Sirius, whose annual reappearance in the sky announced the earth-fructifying flood season of the river Nile. Inanna, it will be remembered, descended from the heavens into the hell region of her sister opposite, the Queen of Death, Ereshkigal. And she left behind Ninshubur, her messenger, with instructions to rescue her should she not return. She arrived naked before the 7 judges. They fastened their eyes upon her. She was turned into a corpse, and the corpse, as we have seen, was hung upon a stake. After 3 days and 3 nights had passed, Inanna's messenger Ninshubur, her messenger of favorable words, her carrier of supporting words, filled the heaven with complaints for her, cried for her in the assembly shrine, rushed about for her in the house of the gods. Like a pauper in a single garment he dressed for her. To the Eker, the house of Enlil, all alone he directed his step. Figure 49. Goddess rising, carved marble, Italy, Greece, circa 460 B.C. Enlil was the Sumerian air god, Nanna the moon god, Enki the water god and god of wisdom. At the time of the composition of our document, 3rd millennium B.C., Enlil was the chief divinity of the Sumerian pantheon. He was quick to anger. He was the sender of the flood. Nanna was one of his sons. In the myths the benign god Enki appears typically in the role of the helper. He is the patron and advisor both of Gilgamesh and of the flood hero, Atarsis Unabishtam Noah. The motif of Enki versus Enlil is carried on by classical mythology in the counterplay of Poseidon versus Zeus, Neptune versus Jove. This is the beginning of the rescue of the goddess, and illustrates the case of one who so knew the power of the zone into which she was entering that she took the precaution to have herself arouse. Ninshubur went first to the god Enlil, but the god said that, Inanna having gone from the grade above to the grade below, in the netherworld the decrees of the netherworld should prevail. Ninshubur next went to the god Nanna, but the god said that she had gone from the grade above to the grade below, and that in the netherworld the decrees of the netherworld should prevail. Ninshubur went to the god Enki, and the god Enki devised a plan. He fashioned 2 sexless creatures and entrusted to them the food of life and the water of life, with instructions to proceed to the netherworld and sprinkle this food and water 60 times on Inanna's suspended corpse. Upon the corpse hung from a stake they directed the fear of the rays of fire. 60 times the food of life, 60 times the water of life. They sprinkled upon it. Inanna arose. Inanna ascends from the netherworld. The Anunnaki fled, and whoever of the netherworld may have descended peacefully to the netherworld. When Inanna ascends from the netherworld, verily the dead hasten ahead of her. Verily the dead hasten ahead of her. The small demons like reeds, the large demons like tablet styluses, walked at her side. Who walked in front of her, held a staff in hand. Who walked at her side, carried a weapon on the loin. They who preceded her, they who preceded Inanna, were beings who know not food, who know not water, who eat not sprinkled flour, who drink not libated wine, who take away the wife from the loins of man, who take away the child from the breast of the nursing mother. Surrounded by this ghostly, ghastly crowd, Inanna wandered through the land of Sumer, from city to city. 19. These 3 examples from widely separated culture areas, Raven, Amaterasu, and Inanna, sufficiently illustrate the rescue from without. They show in the final stages of the adventure the continued operation of the supernatural assisting force that has been attending the elect through the whole course of his ordeal. His consciousness having succumbed, the unconscious nevertheless supplies its own balances, and he is born back into the world from which he came. Instead of holding to and saving his ego, as in the pattern of the magic flight, he loses it, and yet, through grace is returned. This brings us to the final crisis of the round, to which the whole miraculous excursion has been but a prelude, that, namely, of the paradoxical, supremely difficult threshold crossing of the hero's return from the mystic realm into the land of common day. Whether rescued from without, driven from within, or gently carried along by the guiding divinities, he has yet to re-enter with his boon the long-forgotten atmosphere where men who are fractions imagine themselves to be complete. He has yet to confront society with his ego-shattering, life-redeeming elixir, and take the return blow of reasonable queries, hard resentment, and good people at a loss to comprehend. Figure 50. The reappearance of the hero. Samson with the temple doors. Christ arisen. Jonah. Engraving. German. A.D. 1471. 4. The crossing of the return threshold. The 2 worlds, the divine and the human, can be pictured only as distinct from each other, different as life and death, as day and night. The hero adventures out of the land we know into darkness. There accomplishes his adventure, or again is simply lost to us, imprisoned, or in danger, and his return is described as a coming back out of that yonder zone. Nevertheless, and here is a great key to the understanding of myth and symbol, the 2 kingdoms are actually one. The realm of the gods is a forgotten dimension of the world we know. And the exploration of that dimension, either willingly or unwillingly, is the whole sense of the deed of the hero. The values and distinctions that in normal life seem important disappear with the terrifying assimilation of the self into what formerly was only otherness. As in the stories of the cannibal ogresses, the fearfulness of this loss of personal individuation can be the whole burden of the transcendental experience for unqualified souls. But the hero soul goes boldly in, and discovers the hags converted into goddesses and the